Who, if not our loved ones, should we trust in this world? A world, unfortunately, full of deceit and evil. Evil that is sometimes deadly in every sense. In October 2012, 24-year-old Rebekah Gay vanished in broad daylight. The investigation into her disappearance led to a shocking outcome. The perpetrator was someone trusted not only by the young woman and her family, but by the entire community. Halloween is inherently a spooky holiday, often associated with playful costumes, home decorations, and treats. But in this case, Halloween brought a true nightmare. A monster somehow disguised himself as an ordinary person, and that's far scarier than any fictional tale. And before we get started, be kind enough to support my channel. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and stay active. It will help a lot. I will be very grateful to you for that. Let's get started. Rebekah Gay was born on March 26, 1988, to Thomas and Sally Gay. She grew up with her 3 siblings in Midland, Michigan. Rebekah's father, Thomas, was highly respected in the community, known for his expertise in horseback riding, horse management, and training. Thomas was one of the founders of a charity horse race aimed at raising funds for a children's hospital. He was deeply compassionate toward both people and animals. Thomas set a strong example for his children, instilling in them values of unity, faith, and hard work. Rebekah spent her childhood in a small town, enjoying the safety of a tight-knit community where everyone knew each other. She played with her siblings in their yard, attended church with her family, and went to school. The girl stood out for her gentle nature and compassionate spirit, traits she inherited from her parents. When Rebekah's father fell ill with a terminal disease, the family made the heartbreaking decision to place him in hospice care where he could receive the round-the-clock support he needed for comfort. His wife and children visited as often as they could, doing their best to brighten his final days. Rebekah was in high school in Midland at the time and was a member of the equestrian team. She also volunteered at school archery competitions, helping raise money for families in need. In essence, she followed in her father's footsteps. After graduating high school in 2007, Rebekah decided to pursue a career in the beauty industry and enrolled in cosmetology school. During this time, she was in a serious relationship with a young man named Chad Sando. She completed her cosmetology program and began working as a stylist at a salon in Mount Pleasant, near where her mother, Sally, lived. After Thomas was placed in hospice and later passed away from his illness, Sally felt profoundly lonely. Her children had grown up and were living their own lives, leaving her to contemplate her future alone. Sally, who had been married to Thomas for years, struggled to cope with life's challenges on her own. Unaccustomed to solitude, she turned to online dating sites to fill the void. Sally wasn't looking for a new husband. She simply wanted someone to talk to, share her struggles with, and feel less isolated. She moved into a mobile home in a trailer park in Broomfield Valley. Eventually, she met a man and began corresponding with him. His name was John Douglas White, and he lived in Augusta, Michigan, about a 2-hour drive from her. Soon, they moved in together, and John took a job as a pastor at a nearby church where Sally taught Sunday school. They enjoyed each other's company, sharing many common interests, especially their Christian beliefs. Mount Pleasant, Michigan, had a population of just under 20,000. Sally's neighborhood was a 20-minute drive from Mount Pleasant, a rural area with picturesque farmland. It was a peaceful, quiet place to raise children. Rebekah, Sally's youngest daughter, learned she was pregnant. When her baby named Connor was born, she and Chad did everything they could to provide a stable environment for the child. Unfortunately, the birth of a child can be a significant challenge for many young couples. In this case, Chad couldn't handle it, as motherhood profoundly changed Rebekah. Her son Connor became her entire world, and she was wholly focused on creating the best life for him. Though Rebekah had always been a caring and responsible person, becoming a mother gave her an even deeper sense of purpose. She juggled her work responsibilities with the demands of being a single mother. Despite the challenges, she never complained and approached every aspect of her life with gratitude. Now in need of support, Rebekah decided to rent a mobile home in the same area as her mother in the Broomfield Valley Trailer Park. She felt safe knowing her mother was nearby. Sally and John lived across the street from her. Rebekah and her son spent nearly every evening at her mother's house. John cooked them dinner and, of course, helped care for Connor. He embraced the idea of having a real family, happily stepping into the role of a father figure for Rebekah and a grandfather figure for Connor, often driving him to daycare and watching him when Rebekah was busy. For a while, Rebekah built her career in cosmetology, but with Connor's arrival, she could no longer spend long hours at the salon. So she took a job at a retail store in Mount Pleasant. She entrusted Connor's care to her mother and John, as they had become almost like one family. Rebekah got along well with her colleagues and quickly rose to a managerial position. Meanwhile, her personal life was also progressing. She met a man named Aaron Quinn. They met when Connor was about a year old. Aaron embraced the boy as his own son. He treated Rebekah with great love and respect and planned to propose to her in the near future. Aaron's family considered Rebekah part of their own, and Sally and her partner John White supported her daughter's choice. Rebekah, in turn, quickly welcomed John into her family. There was a time when John fell ill with a bad cold, and Rebekah made him soup, picked up medicine from the pharmacy, and ordered him pizza. John was always there when she needed help with Connor. So Rebekah had a strong support system and a bright future ahead. It was important to her that she was surrounded by good people. Her lifestyle may have been modest, but she filled her world with love and warmth, ensuring her son had everything he needed. In 2012, Connor turned 3, and Halloween was approaching. Rebekah was especially excited because it had been her favorite holiday since childhood. Connor was now at an age where dressing up in costumes and trick-or-treating was thrilling. They had already picked out an adorable Spider-Man costume for him. The store Rebekah managed had received a shipment of scarecrows, and she bought 8 of them to decorate her yard. She took great joy in decorating her home with holiday symbols, setting out pumpkins, hanging fake cobwebs, and putting up spooky signs on the door. On the eve of Halloween, Rebekah was home alone with her son. In the morning, Connor needed to be dropped off with Chad, his biological father, where he would spend the day. After work, Rebekah planned to pick him up, put on his costume, and take him trick-or-treating for the first time. She had so many exciting plans for the holiday that she called her mother and Aaron to share her joy. That evening she was, as usual, happy and fully focused on celebrating Halloween. No one suspected that the holiday would never come for her. For the past few months, Rebekah had been working the morning shift to spend more time with her son. When she didn't show up for work on October 31st, 2012, it puzzled not only her bosses, but also her colleagues. Rebekah hadn't called or given any notice of her absence. As a manager, no one could imagine her oversleeping or skipping a shift. Most perplexing of all, no one could reach her. The management sent a colleague to Rebekah's home to check on her. Perhaps she was dealing with an issue and needed help. But no one answered when he knocked on the door. It seemed no one was home. He tried the front door, but it appeared locked. So he got back in his car and headed back to the store. On his way, he noticed something odd. Just a few dozen yards from Rebekah's home was a bar, and in its parking lot stood a light blue 4-door Buick. It was Rebekah Gay's car, but there was no reason for her to park it there, as she had a driveway right in front of her house. Her colleague went into the bar to inquire about the light blue Buick. The bartender, who had worked the evening shift, said he saw the car but that Rebekah hadn't come inside. The previous evening, she had been with her son, so it seemed unlikely she would have gone to the bar and left Connor alone. However, the bar staff managed to find the phone number of the trailer park's owner. The owner offered to open Rebekah's door so her colleague could ensure she was okay. Rebekah was 24, young and healthy, but perhaps an emergency had arisen. Maybe she was at home and unable to answer the door. But she wasn't there. Only her favorite purse, which she never parted with, lay open on the table. Aaron had given her that purse. The colleague contacted Sally and John to ask if Rebekah had mentioned any plans for the day. As soon as her mother learned her daughter hadn't shown up for work, she rushed to Rebekah's home with John. Neighbors began gathering around the trailer, speculating about where the young woman could be. By noon, her family reported her missing to the county sheriff's department. But the authorities were hesitant to start a search since Rebekah was an adult. They didn't want to jump to conclusions, but acknowledged the situation seemed strange. The police decided to wait until 4:30 p.m., when Rebekah was supposed to pick up Connor, to confirm it wasn't a misunderstanding. Missing work was one thing, but not contacting her family or boyfriend was another. If a mother didn't show up to pick up her son, something was clearly wrong. As a result, 4.5 hours of precious time that could have been used to gather information, search for evidence, and clarify the circumstances of her disappearance were wasted. Rebekah's family had no choice but to sit and wait. John White called her friends and acquaintances. As a pastor, he also reached out to his congregation for help in the search. Sally prayed for her daughter's safety, hoping she would return soon with an explanation. Her loved ones tried their best not to panic, but it was difficult. That morning, Connor needed to be dropped off at a grocery store parking lot where Chad would pick him up. Since Rebekah now worked the day shift, she couldn't make the meeting, so John and Sally helped out. That morning, John White arrived at the trailer around 7 a.m. While Rebekah was in the bathroom getting ready for work, he waited for Connor to wake up, changed him from pajamas to regular clothes, and took him to his father. John noticed nothing unusual that morning, and now wondered where Rebekah could have gone in such a short time. Naturally, by 4:30 p.m., Rebekah hadn't appeared. By then, the police had obtained a search warrant for her home and car and immediately began investigating what had happened. They started by examining the house. They noticed the open purse but saw that Rebekah's keys and phone were nowhere to be found. There were no signs of a break-in, meaning either Rebekah took the items herself or someone who abducted her did. The most alarming piece of evidence was a spot on the hallway carpet. It looked fluffier than the rest of the carpet, as if it had been recently cleaned. Upon closer inspection, detectives noticed dark streaks. It could have been blood, or perhaps Connor had spilled something, and his mother tried to clean it up. Then, on one of the walls, officers found tiny droplets of blood. There were also splatters on some kitchen cabinets and a door handle. These were alarming signs, so the police taped off the house with yellow crime scene tape, adding a grim touch to the Halloween decorations. Investigators moved to Rebekah's car and immediately noticed something off. Rebekah, being petite, typically had her car seat positioned close to the steering wheel, but now someone had moved it far back. From that position, Rebekah couldn't have reached the pedals. Additionally, the car's location and the way it was parked, seemingly hidden among trees, raised questions. The police were now certain a crime had occurred. They interviewed relatives, friends, and colleagues to determine who might have wanted to harm Rebekah Gay. No one could understand who would have a grudge against her. She was kind, kept to herself, and caused no trouble. She wasn't involved in any risky activities and had no enemies. While neighborhood kids celebrated Halloween, happily trick-or-treating to fill their buckets with candy, Rebekah's family was filled with dread. Connor's first spooky holiday would forever be tainted by the oppressive atmosphere of his mother's disappearance. That day, the boy never got to wear his Spider-Man costume or experience holiday traditions. John asked a church elder to pray for Rebekah's swift return. It's impossible to imagine how her family felt as people walked the streets in terrifying costumes covered in fake blood, while real blood splatters were found in their loved one's home. Halloween night took on an entirely new meaning for Rebekah's family. Costumes no longer seemed fun because a real criminal could be hiding behind any mask. The first two suspects were Chad Sando, Connor's father, and Rebekah's ex-boyfriend, and her current boyfriend, Aaron Quinn. When something happens to a woman, her partners are typically the first to be suspected. Both men were brought to the police station for questioning. Aaron cooperated willingly and seemed deeply upset by Rebekah's disappearance. He knew how important this day was to her. He said he last spoke with Rebekah the previous evening. At 10:43 p.m., he sent her a good-night text, but she didn't reply. Aaron assumed she was already asleep. He was more surprised when she ignored his usual good-morning text the next day. Moreover, the message wasn't even delivered, meaning Rebekah's phone was either turned off or out of service. This information helped authorities narrow the timeline of when Rebekah stopped communicating. Suspicion was lifted from Aaron after investigators verified his whereabouts that morning. In fact, Aaron admitted to detectives that he had been planning to propose to Rebekah for weeks. He had been saving for a ring and waiting for the right moment. He hoped that moment would be Halloween night, Rebekah's favorite holiday. But his plans were not to be. For a moment, police considered that Rebekah might not have wanted to stay with Aaron and ran away. But they quickly dismissed this theory. Everyone they spoke to insisted that Rebekah loved Aaron and wanted to marry him. The couple had discussed their future together and building a family. Next, it was Chad's turn, but he had little to add. He spoke highly of his ex-girlfriend, saying that despite their circumstances, they maintained a friendly relationship and did their best for their son. Finally, authorities turned to another man close to Rebekah, Pastor John White, her mother's fiancé and a key figure in raising Connor. He appeared to be the last person to see her alive when he came to pick up Connor to take him to his father while Rebekah got ready for work. John immediately faced intense scrutiny as detectives focused on his precise answers. This could make anyone feel uneasy. It's easy to forget small details of daily routines when you don't know they'll be important later. What Rebekah was wearing, whether she seemed normal or acted differently, whether she said she was going straight to work or mentioned stopping by the bar, how Connor behaved, or what he said. Questions came one after another, but detectives hoped the pastor could shed light on details that might help find Rebekah. John tried hard to cooperate with authorities and recounted the morning's details. At 55, getting up early to help Rebekah was no trouble. When he arrived at the trailer, the porch light was on, and the front door was unlocked, so he assumed Rebekah was awake and getting ready for work. When he entered, he heard water running in the bathroom, so he didn't see Rebekah, only heard her. She shouted that Connor was still asleep and suggested John lie down, asking him to turn off the heat when they left. John rested on the couch and dozed off. Then Connor woke him around 8 a.m. By then, Rebekah had gone to work, so he changed the boy and took him to meet his father. At first glance, the story seemed plausible, with nothing unusual. But investigators noticed something odd that caught their attention. John had fresh cuts on his nose and hands, resembling defensive wounds. When asked about them, he had a reasonable explanation. He said he had been doing repair work in his trailer that day, and a shelf fell, injuring his nose. He even offered to walk to his home to show how it happened. Detectives took his word and let him go, continuing their investigation. They spoke with neighbors, friends, family, and anyone connected to Rebekah to learn about her relationship with John White, her mother's fiancé. Piecing together information, police identified moments that made them reconsider the bigger picture. They decided to focus on John until other suspects emerged. They interviewed the congregation, about 24 people. Everyone adored Pastor White. Sally Gay was also a member and taught Sunday school. She once saw a posting for a pastor position and told John, who had earned a minister's license years earlier. He agreed to come and try the role. The elder who hired him assured detectives that Pastor John White was a man of God with no connection to Rebekah's disappearance. He was gentle and pleasant to talk to. He was respected for helping not just Rebekah. John personally cleaned her home's gutters when needed. He helped a family with 6 children build a deck in their backyard and often watched their kids. John had been in Rebekah and Sally's lives for over 6 years, earning their full trust. Investigators explained they had to rule out everyone in Rebekah's life, a standard procedure. As they spoke with community members, rumors spread that police suspected Pastor John White, and opinions about him began to shift. For instance, Staff at the local bar shared their perspective. Apparently, Pastor White enjoyed strong drinks, which wasn't condoned in the Christian faith. That morning on Halloween, he stopped by the bar asking about Rebekah. Some of Rebekah's colleagues said she mentioned multiple times that John made her deeply uncomfortable. She even considered moving. They weren't the only ones who noticed oddities in John White and Rebekah's relationship. Aaron also felt something was off. Rebekah's boyfriend described John as obsessive, noting that after Rebekah got a permanent hairstyle, White started visiting daily to compliment her. He showed up at her home and workplace unannounced, which seemed inappropriate. John didn't treat Rebekah like a daughter. He saw her as an attractive young woman. John White's younger sister told police he often called, excited about having a real family with Sally, Rebekah, and little Connor. But when Rebekah started dating Aaron and stopped spending time with her mother and John, he began complaining. He said after all he did for her, Rebekah abandoned him. He repeated this over and over, and his sister laughed it off. Why would a young woman hang out with older people? At the time, she didn't think much of it. But now that Rebekah was missing, she suspected John might have forgotten his relationship was with Sally, not Rebekah. His interest seemed unhealthy, given his past. Due to conflicting accounts about the pastor, police asked him to take a polygraph test. It was the quickest way to clear doubts or detect deception. Knowing polygraph results aren't always accurate and depend on emotional state. John hesitated. Should he take the test at all? Rebekah's mother, Sally, had to persuade him to agree, to prove he wasn't involved in her daughter's disappearance. When John White finally consented, a detective deliberately picked him up in a patrol car and sat him in the front seat, hoping to glean information on the drive to another city with polygraph equipment. They chatted about trivial things until the pastor felt at ease. It worked like a charm before they reached the station. John White explained why he was reluctant to take the polygraph. He admitted to a criminal past unknown to anyone, including his fiancée and the church. These weren't minor offenses. He had been involved in an attempted murder case. Back then, John was much younger and a different person. He made mistakes, some leading to convictions. By now it was over, the case was closed, and he was released. According to White, he was wrongly convicted, leaving a deep mark on his life. He told the detective that after his release, he turned his life around. When the church gave him a second chance, he seized it. While law enforcement worked tirelessly to uncover the truth, the community didn't sit idle. In this small town where everyone knew and loved each other, many were desperate to help. Volunteers formed search parties to comb the area around Rebekah's home, hoping to find clues to her whereabouts. Social media was flooded with requests for information. Flyers with Rebekah's picture were posted everywhere, on poles, in shop windows, and on community bulletin boards. Tension grew by the hour, but no solid leads emerged. While John took the polygraph, detectives dug deeper into his past, and what they found was horrifying. The new information stunned the police department. Former convict White, now a pastor, was known as a man redeemed by God, using his past to guide others. So who was Pastor John? John Douglas White was born on May 20th, 1957. He had two sisters, one older and one younger, with whom he was close. Their father was a police chief, fire chief, and mayor of Augusta, Michigan, where they lived. If John got into trouble, it reached his father quickly, so he tried to behave. John had a normal, healthy childhood, spending much time with his family. After high school, White joined the Navy, later discharged and married. At his new home, he befriended a 17-year-old neighbor, Teresa Etherton. One day, he invited her to his basement, promising to show a cool model car racing track he claimed to have built. Teresa trusted her neighbor and saw no reason to refuse, so she followed him to the basement. Once behind her, John suddenly stabbed her under her right shoulder blade. Stunned, Teresa turned to see what was happening and saw John White clutching a knife with a pained expression. Seconds later, the attack continued. He stabbed Teresa 15 times and then tried to strangle her, Miraculously, she survived and escaped the basement. After receiving medical care, she named her attacker to authorities. Teresa said White told her it wasn't his first time attacking women. He clearly had serious issues. John was arrested, charged, and convicted of attempted murder. He told his wife he and Teresa were in the basement smoking weed when she attacked him with a knife, wanting his stash. His hands were covered in cuts. At trial, White feigned remorse, calling himself a young fool who made a big mistake, vowing never to do it again. He was 22. White was sentenced to 5 to 10 years for the brutal attack. He was also required to undergo psychological counseling. 2 years later, in 1983, he appealed his conviction, claiming his lawyer didn't act in his best interest. White got a lenient deal, allowing him to leave prison after 2 years and serve 2 years of probation. He was ordered to undergo mental health treatment. Thus, John White got off lightly for a vicious attack on a defenseless girl. Due to his lawyer's error and the judge's leniency, John was freed but didn't abandon his urge to harm women. 10 years later, he was a father of 2, with a 3rd child on the way. For a long time, John worked as a truck driver, but with children, he switched to a more stable job at an industrial laundry. He maintained equipment. At that time, his urges to harm women resurfaced. In July 1994, a 26-year-old woman named Vicky Sue Wall vanished. She worked at the same laundry and had an affair with John. They secretly met in the back parking lot of a store, making love in White's pickup truck. That's where she was last seen. This led authorities straight to John White. He admitted to the affair but claimed he dropped Vicky off shortly after they were seen on surveillance cameras in the parking lot. She was alive and well. He didn't know what happened to her afterward. White then told detectives he had blackouts, so he might not remember if he did something to his lover. After this confession, he told his wife he couldn't live like this anymore and wanted to end his life. Instead, he left home and got drunk. Forensic experts later found blood stains in White's truck, but there wasn't enough for DNA analysis. At the time, DNA testing was available, but it required a significant amount of biological material for accuracy. 6 weeks later, a passerby noticed a white tennis shoe in the grass 3 kilometers from the store parking lot where Vicky was last seen. Approaching the find, he noticed drag marks and a clear smell of decomposition. The marks led to women's underwear, and further along lay a decomposed human body. It was the remains of the missing Vicky Sue Wall. The coroner couldn't determine the exact cause of death due to severe environmental exposure. The only clear detail was that she was partially unclothed. Her shirt and bra were wrapped around her neck. Clearly, Vicky didn't die of natural causes. She was killed. John White was the prime suspect. At the time, he was in a psychiatric hospital, likely planning to claim insanity to avoid prison again. Because White refused a polygraph and wouldn't discuss his affair with Vicky, police lacked sufficient evidence of his involvement. Prosecutors offered him a deal, which he accepted, pleading guilty to manslaughter. At sentencing, the judge noted his prior violent treatment of women and gave him the maximum sentence, 8 to 15 years in prison. But that wasn't all the police knew. To friends and family, John bragged that as a truck driver he often picked up prostitutes, disdainfully calling them lot lizards. After using their services, he'd stop near dumpsters and throw them out, believing such people had no societal value. None of the affected women reported him, but his realistic stories were corroborated by his attacks on Teresa Etherton and Vicky Sue Wall. While in prison, White told his psychologist he wanted to kill the prosecutor, his lawyer, and the judge. He also admitted to dark fantasies about their dead bodies. During his imprisonment, his wife filed for divorce, and his parents passed away. White began studying the Bible, repented, and dedicated his life to God while behind bars. He attended group therapy and met frequently with mental health professionals. He earned a minister's license and, as a model prisoner, spent much of his time in the chapel. Despite numerous red flags in his behavior and mindset, authorities initially considered his transformation and released him in 2007 to rejoin society. No probation or monitoring was assigned. After prison, White moved north to start anew. He met Sally, Rebekah Gay's mother, through online correspondence. He moved in with her in the trailer park and became a pastor in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. When applying at the church, White explained his conviction, saying he had been involved with a woman who used drugs. She died of an overdose, he panicked and fled, and he paid the price. Naturally, they believed him. John repeatedly thanked his small congregation for giving him a chance, but deep down, he hadn't changed. He started a new life, far from his past, to avoid its shadow. Yet the dark fantasies of his twisted inner world never faded. Clearly, John had a serious problem. Authorities now wondered if he had acted on those fantasies with Rebekah. While Pastor John White took the polygraph, detectives dug into his background and were stunned by the extent of his criminal history involving violence against women. He didn't hide his legal troubles, but his guilt was significantly downplayed. The church also knew of John's criminal past, but the elder saw him as a reformed man of God, focused on the present and future. Learning from his past, White helped parishioners, watched their children, and lived a quiet, respectable life. Could he have been harboring dark plans all along? Realizing the pastor's knack for deception, police saw through his facade. The polygraph showed most of his answers were deceptive. With this new information, detectives obtained a warrant to search his truck and trailer. They found red stains and a broken necklace in the truck, looking like it was torn off someone. It was later identified as Rebekah's. In the truck's cab, they found a bag with zip ties, large construction trash bags, and small-sized women's underwear matching Rebekah's size. In the trailer, they found a rubber mallet with bloodstains. Police confronted White with these findings, but he insisted Rebekah was kidnapped, and he had no idea what happened to her. The interrogation lasted nearly 12 hours. It was early morning on November 1st, 2012. Realizing White could be questioned endlessly without breaking, detectives played on his emotions. It was clear John loved Sally, Rebekah's mother, and didn't want to hurt her. Sally had improved his life, helped him become a pastor, and welcomed him into her family. Detectives explained what would happen to Rebekah's body over time, describing decomposition and its appearance. They emphasized how devastating it would be for Sally to see her daughter's decayed remains and how Connor would cope with his mother's tragic death. They insisted that by telling the truth, John would prove his love for Sally, his fiancée. Initially, White asked for a lawyer, but after sitting alone with his thoughts when officers left the room, he agreed to speak openly, first requesting a final call to his fiancée. When Sally answered, John said she was the love of his life, but she would never want to speak to him again. He didn't explain, just kept apologizing, saying nothing could be fixed. Then he abruptly hung up. Pastor John White asked for a deal ensuring lifelong imprisonment and isolation. He then confessed to killing Rebekah Gay. His story was as follows. At some point, John felt attracted to Rebekah. On Halloween Eve, he was browsing an adult website about necrophilia, which intrigued him. After drinking several large beers, he went to Rebekah's home. It was around 2 a.m., but the doors were unlocked. Earlier that day, he had visited Connor and Rebekah and intentionally left the trailer's back door open. John entered, and at the sound of the door, Rebekah ran out of her bedroom and was struck several times on the head with a rubber mallet. Before losing consciousness, Rebekah looked at White and said she recognized him. The last thing she saw was a man she trusted implicitly. Realizing she was still alive and breathing, John wrapped a zip tie around her neck and tightened it with all his strength. White then sat and watched her die. He dragged her body to the kitchen and undressed it. He claimed he didn't recall if he had sexual contact with her corpse. He tried to clean the blood with spray cleaner and towels. He turned off Rebekah's phone, took her Buick keys, parked the car near the bar, and threw the keys and phone in a nearby dumpster to mislead police. Returning to the trailer on foot, he placed Rebekah's bloody clothes and the towels in a large construction trash bag, along with her body. As he loaded the bag into his truck, it tore. Her broken necklace fell out, and blood leaked, leading authorities to him. He dumped Rebekah's remains in a ravine near the trailer park and disposed of the bloody towels. He scattered evidence within a 1-mile radius of the house. After eliminating the crime's traces, he returned to Rebekah's trailer and slept on her couch for the rest of the night. The next morning, he changed Connor and took him to his father, acting as if nothing had happened. Rebekah Gay's body was found in the ravine where White indicated. Her injuries fully corroborated his confession. John White was sentenced to a minimum of 56 years and a maximum of 85 years, meaning he could be eligible for parole after 56 years. At 55 years old at the time of sentencing, this meant he would remain in prison for life. "Some people have no place in society, and you are one of them," the judge declared. However, the pastor monster was too cowardly to face his punishment. 4 months later, on August 28, 2013, he took his own life in his prison cell. John Douglas White's case exposed flaws in the justice system, which failed to recognize him as a predator and prevent further crimes. If you have finished watching, you are a real fan of true crime. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell notifications, and put the like. See you in the next video.